Hey, I'm Gerald from Dwarfs and Giants. At the beginning of 2016, we published an article in Harvard Business Manager's special edition on change management. There we tried to sketch a map of what we call the next land of organizing, a new continent where organizations operate successfully in a completely different paradigm. Meanwhile, the map has become an interactive platform where you can learn and exchange. Among the various regions in Nextland, there is a very special place growing and thriving. We called it HolacraCity. Brian Robertson from HolacracyOne is co-founder of HolacraCity. His book Holacracy has been discussed around the world, and right now it's out in German as well. So let's see what Brian is reporting about HolacraCity. Brian, HolacraCity is a vibrant city of a new paradigm of organizing and managing, and there's a lot of buzz around in the media. What's your impression? What's going on?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of organizational pioneers who are, I think, waking up to the idea that the way we've structured and grown our organizations for the past century may not serve us for the next. And they're here trying to find a new approach and build new ways of structuring and governing companies.
When we call it HolacraCity, we refer to the comparison of Harvard economist Edward Glaeser in his book Triumph of the City. He describes what happens when cities grow. Productivity rises by 15%. Whereas in growing conventional organizations, we see the complete opposite happening. Productivity drops. What's your explanation for that, Brian?
Yeah, well, if you look at the fundamental paradigm of how we achieve order in a city, it's very different than how we do in a typical company. A city relies on self-organization and emergent order. It relies on having a framework of rules within which people have a lot of autonomy and freedom to self-organize, to pursue their own local piece, but in an interconnected way with a whole system. And when you have that, you get this beautiful organic system where evolution and change is built right in. And you compare that to what we see in a typical company where the word bureaucracy comes to mind. It's static. It doesn't survive and thrive in dynamic complexity like a city does. And I think that's the fundamental difference, a different paradigm of order. And if we want our companies to thrive in the way cities do and to survive as long as cities do, most companies don't. We need to find ways to bring that method of organizing into our organizations.
So what you're referring to are the old paradigms of hierarchies of power and people, predict and control, established in the industrial age. What are the major shifts you see from now land to next land? So
one of the probably biggest is that fundamental paradigm. With a typical company today, we use a management hierarchy to try to impose an order, to predict and control and keep everything structured, to get alignment and accountability and break down the work and all of those things we really do need in any organization with any structure. But when you do that with a top-down control system, it's like trying to plan a country's economy with central top-down planning. We've learned as a species that is limited, right? Highly, severely limited. When complexity grows, that starts failing. And I think that's what we see in our companies today. So one of the major shifts Holacracy brings in is a more self-organizing system. It still has ways to break down the work, to get clarity, to make sure we have alignment and accountability and all the other things we look to managers to do. But with Holacracy, it does it without a management hierarchy. Instead, it adds a governance process that's distributed throughout the organization. So every team engages in this governance process to do the work that typically the management hierarchy did, and to do it much more dynamically, with much more agility and much more responsiveness to the outside world.
Brian, there's different experiences reported in media worldwide of companies that implemented Holacracy. And there's managers, of course, asking themselves, does it make sense for my organization? So what do you think? For whom is it worthwhile to visit HolacraCity?
Yeah, I'd say absolutely no one. What I mean by that, it's a disruptive change. Think back to the days when we leapt from mainframes to microcomputers. What company could afford the disruption of changing the fundamental platform on which everything in their organization, all of their processes, all of their systems were built on top of mainframes? There is never a good time or a good company to make that leap. And yet the ones that delayed it, the ones that didn't, were disrupted out of existence by the startups, right? Mm-hmm. And I think we're going to see the same thing with the fundamental approaches we take to organizing today. The companies that don't make the leap and disrupt themselves will be disrupted by the market. So my take is any company needs to focus on disrupting itself at regular intervals or it won't survive very long. And when's the right time? There isn't one. Do you need to do it anyway? You better at least consider it.
Thanks, Brian, for this inspiring conversation. If you got interested in visiting HolacraCity, look into the book. It's out now in German. And Brian, see you in Vienna.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.